barrage her with our differing opinions and making her choose the right ones.
It's a game show.
What did she say? What did she say? Don't ask people who know about construction before you buy a house because you'll just be overwhelmed with stress.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, a weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Rob Wadzak, Digital Brand Manager.
Hey there.
Kiley Jacques, Design Editor.
Hello.
And producer Jeff Rose.
Hi.
Well, it is a pleasure to see you all this morning. Thanks again for joining me.
My pleasure.
So I want to start off with something briefly. Kiley, someone commented on iTunes with regard to the podcast, and they said some very nice things, and many of them were about you. So you should definitely take a look at that. Really? And I want to encourage all of our listeners to please review the podcast. It really helps us out, both in terms to know that we're doing a good job and to help others find it. So if you could do that for me, I would be super appreciative. That comment was dated on July 29th, but prior to that, the most recent one was like the end of April. So get to work, people.
And thank you in advance. I look forward to doing it.
Rob, what have you been doing?
What have I been doing? Well, I keep talking about that porch, but I'm kind of done with that. There's nothing new to say about it.
Time to just hang out on it.
Other than last night, I just sat out there and enjoyed a glass of wine, even though it's not completely done yet. Just sat there and watched the sunset. So
drinking hooch on your new deck is the best thing ever.
Yeah. That's a deck for hooch.
But actually, the next project. I mean, it's not actually the next project because it's a big one. Is it's been so hot and muggy lately that for years on and off, I've been like, do we want a pool? Problem is, we're very particular about our garden, and I would have, when my daughter was little, thrown up a crappy pool in the backyard just to cool off, but it doesn't fit into the landscape design apparently of our property. So
it definitely does not.
No, so we've been.
I totally disagree. I think an above ground wood grain pool would look absolutely fantastic back there.
As long as I pick the right wood grain, right? Well, I was going to actually just plant some bamboo or tall grasses in front of it so that you could kind of hide it. But the problem is I just don't have the space for that. So we've been talking about, we have a narrow lot with a 20-foot setback from both sides. And it's 60 feet wide. So that means we could just put something in the middle of our yard. And there's not very many places to do that. But we found this one garden bed that we're willing to take a chunk out of and possibly dig in and build a concrete soaking pool. So it's something that's
soaking pool.
It's basically, it's bigger than a hot tub, but it's not something you could swim laps in.
Right.
And probably, even though it seems kind of a labor intensive thing, probably do it with pouring a slab and doing a block wall and plastering the block wall and doing stone coping and building.
I don't know why you think that sounds labor intensive.
Yeah. well, actually, I had this great idea. I've been telling Kaya, my daughter, about how hard Liam's working on your property, Patrick. And I even offered her, I think, a little bit more money than you're paying per hour. And I was like, maybe she could dig the hole.
Don't you dare do that. He'll lobby for a raise.
Yeah, competition going.
So, but it would probably stick up it would be right in the lawn. So it would probably stick up about 16 inches out of the lawn with a stone top on it, so that it would actually act like a garden bench as well. And
that's cool, Rob.
Have you
seen anything like that, or is that your own design straight up?
Well, I've actually been just searching around for ideas on Pinterest and elsewhere, and found some nice examples. I found one example of some woman I think it was in the Netherlands, who built one by herself, and there's all this cool stuff, all these cool details that she did, and it's basically the same methods of construction. And one of the coolest things was that I was like, well, it's too small to swim in this thing. And those jet pools that you can swim in place are like thousands and thousands of dollars. Well, this woman bought this thing. It's a harness that you hook to some D-rings in the corner of the pool, and it does the same thing. It like holds you back. So you swim against the harness.
What do you use for a jet?
You don't need a jet. You swim in place because the harness keeps you from swimming forward.
Oh.
You're using
Yeah.
your own resistance. I'll help dig that thing if I can use it now and then.
Okay, sure.
With the harness.
You two are wacky.
And honestly, the digging's going to be really easy because it's all the sand's going to be wheelbarrowed downhill from the site, and my ground is all.
It's like a 30-foot elevation change. What is easy about that?
No, it's going downhill, and my ground is all coarse sand. So like I dug a trench to my barn for a conduit once by hand, and it was no big deal. So it'd be easy.
Nice.
Piece of cake.
I love it. I can't wait to see that. I'm a fan of pools, but not
what does Michelle say about this? Have you told her about...
This is the first time I've gotten her on board with the pool idea.
How much wine did you give her?
Just a little.
I love it.
Kiley, what have you been doing?
Oh, I've been thinking a lot about window styles and screen sizes because of a little incident that I had recently. I really like casement windows because of the nice seal they have, but the ones up in my lofted bedroom are quite small. And as a result, air circulation up here is a little bit, it's sticky. So I don't put my screens in. The mesh is so tight that they get filthy, and I feel like it cuts down on whatever little air circulation I have. So as a result, I leave them wide open, and I had a bat in my room the other night. And that turned into a whole saga in and of itself. But I wound up reading this whole piece by Brian that's actually posted on GBA this morning on buying windows. And it just got me thinking about window styles and what to look for. And I think that I have particularly, I think like the 20 by 20, the screen mesh is so tight. It's just exceptionally tight. I could get, a different screen.
So 20 by 20 refers to like how many holes are in an inch?
Like the difference between, it's how the aluminum, in this case, aluminum strands cross one another.
Interesting.
So, yeah, that's a little bit, that's tighter. That's considered insect screening, which is, I think, what he put in here.
Isn't that what most people want?
No, that's a little bit smaller than most.
Okay.
The average is, I think it's like 18 by 20. I don't know if that's that different, but I do remember thinking, boy, these screens are so tight. They collect dirt. They just look crummy, and I've got my beautiful river view, and they block that. So anyway,
does the tighter mesh actually prevent air circulation? Has that been demonstrated too?
I can't say that much, but I will say a tightly meshed screen that's filthy, it can't help.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So anyway, after that bat and rabies scare, I got thinking about the
rabies scare?
Well, apparently if you're asleep and you wake up to find a bat swooping over your bed, you really probably should... Well, I called my doctor and they didn't get back to me, so clearly they're not very concerned. So I'm avoiding that whole thing, but I had a few friends tell me that I needed to get rabies shots. So sleeping people, be warned if you investigate once you wake up. I was very lucky.
That's why I put the covers completely over my head just to prevent any of that. Well, I wouldn't want to see it if it was even in there. I just would rather not know.
It was horrifying. I'm not going to lie. Ran downstairs, opened up the front door, crouched behind it, covered my hair, and waited to see if it would fly out. And sure enough, it did. So
those are amazing little critters, are they not?
I swear the wingspan was probably about. Well, let's exaggerate and say it was like 4 feet wide. Scared the heck out of me. But anyway, the solution to my issue is a Juliet balcony. That's what I really want. And I really want to do a story on them.
I think you just got to cut some holes in the side of your house and do this.
In the form of a Juliet balcony.
Yeah.
You need to cut a hole, big hole.
I think Rob would be up for some welding for a balustrade.
Oh, yeah. I've even got a piece of an old railing from somebody else's house in the back of my barn that I've been trying to get rid of.
Doesn't have to be fancy. Just needs to be a hole.
Yeah.
I think that would be super awesome, especially if you could make the balustrade made of found objects or cool looking artifacts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you guys know the view I have. It would be sure nice to step out there, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That'd be cool as heck, yeah.
I know you got the same problem I have. We both have a river in the backyard, and the side of our house that's facing the river does not have
the fewest windows.
Yeah, it does the fewest windows. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make any sense.
And it's not the north side. It should have more windows. So,
get some windows. Cut some holes.
Yep.
I can't for the life of me figure out, because I bought this house from a carpenter. I don't know why he made those windows so small.
My guess is he was cheap.
Left over from another job.
Maybe.
Yeah, they were salvaged from somewhere. That's another thing that happens, right?
Mm-hmm. His
client said, "These windows are too small. Get them the heck out of here."
So anyway, that's my story. What about you, Patrick?
So I had some riffraff come by the house yesterday. Had to show him around on the landscape, and he was critiquing our labor team's efforts.
Wonder who that could have been.
So Rob had to go to the office, and he stopped by the house today, and he can tell you Liam's been pretty busy. Today he's pulling crabgrass out of our gravel driveway, which is a great, fun project. I'm sure you'd agree.
So using a butter knife?
We do that sometimes, especially in the garden. But no, he's just pulling it out. It just rained last night and this morning, so it comes out easier than when the ground is all dried out.
Yeah, I noticed your driveway. I guess, when you don't drive your car over it that often, it starts to turn into a lawn, right?
It looked like lawn, right? It does that every year. Occasionally, I will go out there with a weed dragon and burn it all up, but
So fun.
it's really not something you want to do when it's like 85 and 90% humidity. It's like 100,000 BTU burner you're standing over.
It's pretty hot.
Yeah.
So consequently, Liam is pulling out the grass, and we're going to get 5 or 10 yards of gravel to put down and hopefully take care of that.
Where are you going to get that from? The gravel?
O&G is the company. I believe the quarry is in New Milford, right, Rob?
If you're going for the limestone gravel, the white gravel is...
No, we'll get trap rock. We'll get the basalt.
That's what I need.
Yeah, I don't know if that comes from New Milford, but...
It's either there or Southbury, Connecticut. Gravel doesn't ever travel very far. It's kind of expensive to move. Jeff, what have you been doing?
More of the same. I mean, I'm sure people are as sick of hearing about my window trim as I am of doing it.
I bet you're more sick than they are. How many more do you have to go?
I've got one more bad one, and then the rest is just, sanding and painting. So,
have you run out of that epoxy yet?
No, not yet.
That's
getting
good.
low though.
That's expensive, right?
Yeah.
Oh boy, so we heard some great feedback. This comes from Ed. Hey, podcast team, I anxiously await the uploading of your podcast each week and learning about the various topics that you cover. The broad experience of the team is simply amazing. With regards to podcast 267 and the discussion of transitioning from landscaper to builder, I find that Renovation 5th edition by Michael Litchfield and Chip Hurley is a tremendous reference for all kinds of building topics. So I should tell folks, this is a Taunton book that we've published for decades, right, Rob? Wouldn't you guess?
Yep, and it was just revised within the past year, I believe, and it's been one of our most popular sellers for forever.
He says the publication starts with evaluating a house and then provides an encyclopedia of the skills required to remodel or renovate it. I recently transitioned from 40 years of R&D engineering and management with IBM Microelectronics and Global Foundries to retirement and now carpentry. About a year ago, I landed a job with a small construction company in the mid-Hudson Valley, where I was the only employee over 60 years of age, and I enjoyed working with guys that were typically half my age. I'm a subscriber to FHB and have a large collection of Taunton books that provided me with significant head knowledge so I can tackle a wide range of projects and assignments. Thanks to the FHB and Taunton Press. Keep up the good work. Faithful listener to the podcast, Ed. So I talked to Ed. Ed left his job there at that firm when COVID broke out because his wife was worried about him getting sick. So he's keeping busy working on remodeling projects for friends and family. And go, Ed.
That's smart.
This comes from... Go ahead. Please.
I understand the feeling of when I made my career change, I was 38 going, probably closer to 39 anyway. And I had to start at the beginning and do an internship, an unpaid internship. And I remember sitting next to, young people whose experience was so different from mine. I had 20 years on them at least. And
they could more afford to be an unpaid intern, I suspect.
Yeah. I was working at Starbucks, And I was very impressed with them, but I think you really do learn a lot from being around a younger generation, embarking on something that you're equally passionate about, but coming at it from different points of view. I thought that was valuable.
Amen.
Well, you think about it. I mean, between our schools and our work environments, we've conditioned people for generations to think that they should just be spending time with just their
Peers. Yeah.
generation. When, a few generations ago, it was pretty common for the oldest generation to teach the youngest generation while the middle generation was taking care of business. And that's how traditions and skills got passed along for centuries.
That's true.
What the heck went wrong?
Things changed.
This is from Jay. Patrick and team, I just listened to episode 265 while building a tree fort and wanted to say that I transitioned out of the Army in 2016 after 10 years and have found getting into the construction field quite easy, and I'm looking forward to a long career in construction. I also disagree a little about it ruining your body. Well, I hope it doesn't, Jay.
Yeah.
I admit I have some advantages. My dad is a general engineering contractor. It's a California thing. Basically, he does site work, water lines, retaining walls, septic. But he's also a jack of all trades, and we do a lot of side work closer to residential construction. Second, I went to community college right after at night for construction and energy management, which included a lot of code classes and building science classes. Between the podcasts, YouTube, I have found there to be a lot of good information out there. Third, California has a pretty relaxed system of licensing contractors, and I hope to get my license soon. Lastly, I live in an area where there is a lot of work at the moment. That said, I really think that entering this field is extremely doable, and finding good building science information has been so easy. The hard part becomes choosing what to do and making time. In my area, there are Pacific Gas and Electric classes, HERS classes, building performance classes, along with just regular building science classes and physics classes at the community college. Thanks for the podcast and all you do. Well, thank you, Jay.
Yeah, I like that email. It's very encouraging.
We were on one of the BS and beer meetups the other day, and Ben Bogey was on there, and he was talking about how it is intimidating to learn about all this building science.
Oh, yeah.
But he's just got a whole list of podcasts and websites and resources that he goes to, and he realizes he's not going to get it all in one shot. He's just going to, you just got to absorb this stuff over time, and eventually, just like anything else, you get immersed in it, and it becomes a lot clearer to you.
I would say Jay is very fortunate where he lives that there are all those resources. I don't think that's going to be the case everywhere in the country. I really don't.
That's a really good point, Patrick. California's exceptional that way.
And he's in Southern California, which has a lot of money, and there's a lot of interest in California about building science and energy efficiency. So I think he's in the right place. This comes from Tess. Hey, FHB podcast. For my own sanity and commissary, can you guys talk about the supply shortages that have been happening during COVID? I've had several home improvement projects stall out due to waiting for items to be restocked at big box stores and shipping to be at an all-time standstill. For example, the trim that I emailed about back around February is still a project because I had to wait 3 months to collect the plain Jane non-decorative baseboards and shoe molding. I literally had to put an alert on the item and make sure I ordered within the hour of them being restocked. Otherwise, it wasn't quick enough and then would have to wait another few weeks for them to be available for order again. When they did arrive, the boxes had all exploded and the trim ends were all beaten up. See the attached photos. Right now, I'm waiting for curtains, Legrand adorned light switches and plates, and 96-inch dowels, all of which for 3 different active projects. The only company I haven't had issues with is Signature Hardware, so shout out to them and their great products. What about you guys? Have you had issues starting or finishing projects during the pandemic? What have been your compromises to make things work? Well, I'll go first. I wanted to add to my back deck, and of course, pressure-treated lumber is among the things that are hardest to get, especially decking itself. I was fortunate that much of my deck came from a prop that we used for filming some videos and a photo shoot, and so the decking was there, but I did have to buy some pieces, and I had to buy floor joists, and I needed 2x8 floor joists, but I could only buy 2x10, so I had to rip them down and ended up with these expensive little offcuts that are of no utility to anybody. Mm-hmm. But that's my case. What about you guys?
Well, that screen that I built on my porch, that Bahama shutter or storm shutter that I was doing, I was originally planning on using 5/4 decking for the louvers on that thing. And there was none of that to be found anywhere. And
is that because everybody's out building decks?
Yeah, the entire pressure-treated aisle in our local Home Depot was empty. Mm-hmm. And so I was wandering around, and I was kind of giving up on it. And I was wandering down the regular framing lumber aisle, and they had these rough sawn 1x8 boards that I guess people use mostly
For paneling.
or for even formwork, I think, because in fact it's not kiln dried, it's all air dried wood, so they don't recommend even using it for finished projects. But in my application, I ripped it down, cleaned up the edges, sanded it, and it's going to be mounted on vertical slats, which I don't really care if it dries. If it shrinks, you're not going to see it because there's gaps in between them anyway. So, and there's airflow on both sides, so I'm not worried about rot once I stain the thing, and it's under the eaves of this little roof. So it ended up being the right scenario. But what I wonder is, if I had more time, I would have probably gone to one of the local mills. And I wonder how many people are resorting to locally milled lumber to meet shortages. I mean, obviously, you're not going to do that for pressure treated, but
I hope not.
Yeah. But for other applications, might be able to turn to some alternate sources.
That would be a silver lining for the local mills.
Yeah, sure would. You had any trouble getting stuff, Jeff?
Pressure treated decking.
I know Carol had great difficulty getting hardware cloth. We have a vole problem in our vegetable garden, and she puts the this hardware cloth boxes and then plants in those with compost and soil, right? And that keeps the voles from eating all the roots of the plants. And she couldn't get it because apparently everybody else is gardening in addition to building decks.
What is hardware cloth? I don't know that.
So it's like screen, except it has big holes, like quarter-inch or eighth-inch.
It's kind of like square. Yeah, but
smaller than
rigid.
chicken wire.
Okay.
Yeah, usually square holes. So it's kind of like something between.
Oh, okay. I know what you're talking
fencing.
about. I didn't know what that was called. I know what you're talking about, though. Okay.
Yeah.
Go, Carol.
We did finally find it on Amazon in the width she wanted, but it took months to get.
You should ask me. I have a couple of rolls of it lying around my house.
Now you know.
I'll tell Carol right now. So this comes from Nolan from Amherst, Nova Scotia. I'd love to go on a photo shoot to Nova Scotia.
Right?
I got to find a project up there, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Hello, podcast crew. I'm a residential construction contractor, carpenter in Amherst, Nova Scotia, Canada. I love the podcast and have been listening whenever my day's work will allow since the beginning. I find it to be both informative and entertaining. You all do a great job. I'm also a subscriber to Fine Homebuilding and Fine Woodworking. I'm writing today with regard to a building science issue I was called to look at and remedy for a potential client. The client's cottage is 18 years old, wood frame construction with vinyl windows and Cape Cod solid wood siding over a 3/8-inch rain screen and Tyvek WRB. So you guys know what Cape Cod siding is? It's this, I think it's made from lodgepole pine, but it's a milled lap siding. I think they probably have vertical profiles too, but it comes pre-finished. It's very pretty, I think. It's good looking. The homeowner is seeing damaged drywall at the intersection of the wall to ceiling at a couple of places along the north wall. The homeowner believes that wind-driven snow is entering into the ventilated soffit and melting on top of his drywall ceiling. He'd like to have me open the soffits, essentially plug the vents and close it back up. I find this to be an unlikely conclusion given that the soffit lands below the top plate of the wall. The vented area is very small vent channels that are installed on the underside of the roof deck, and one of the areas of damaged drywall is on the first floor ceiling of a 2-story section. It has a full-height shed dormer. Of course, the ceiling is vaulted, so simply climbing into the attic to have a look around is not a possibility. I wonder if this problem is not a leaking window or even roof flashing where the middle section of the building ties into the taller section on each end. I'll include photos to help this all make sense. I appreciate everything you folks do for our industry as a whole, and I look forward to whatever insights or advice you can provide me on this issue. Oh boy, I think this is a can of worms, Nolan. I really do. Have you guys looked at this house?
Yeah, I did.
What do you think?
I just think it seems pertinent that it's on the north wall only.
Because
Right?
why, Kiley?
Some maybe like moisture or thermal expansion and shrinkage, or maybe it's an exceptionally continuous long run. Like maybe, I don't know. It just seems important to note that it's on one wall only.
So
Right?
the house is asymmetrical, right, Rob?
Yeah.
Do you want to try and describe it to listeners?
This we're talking about the one that's it's got the two dormers sticking out the back and the little porch.
Yeah, this is
Is that right?
Nolan.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it just looks like a typical cape, but with two big kind of mini greedy dormers, I guess you would call them, on the back side of the house. So there's sort of a roof section and then a big dormer that shares the back wall of the house, and then another roof section, another big dormer that shares the back wall of the house. I mean, from the pictures,
So it's probably framing issue, right?
I'm saying it could be a flashing issue, but also the ceiling is it looks like it's like a tongue and groove pine board, right?
Bingo.
Yeah, there you go.
Bingo.
That's usually the big sign when you have moisture issues in your ceiling or walls.
It's lacking a good air barrier. So exfiltrating air is condensing on the cold surface, and I think it's worse because it's on the north side, which is going to be colder and not have drying as much as on the south or western sides.
Yeah,
Man, this is going to be tough to fix.
It's there's so many houses that were built in the mid 20th century. A lot of them are vacation homes that were probably never intended to be full-time homes, but then people like the look of the board ceilings and put them up, and they don't realize that you can't put up just plain boards with no air sealing.
The air just seeps right through it, and especially in the wintertime when those boards shrink, their gaps are bigger and you get more exfiltrating air, and it's going to hit the coldest thing it sees, which is going to be the roof sheathing or that wall or some framing thing without insulation, and it's going to make it wet.
Yeah, so I mean, you got to pull that ceiling down, put some drywall up there, and put the ceiling back. It would be the most direct way to do it, I would imagine.
Yeah, or you could spray foam and then put the paneling back up.
How did you guys recognize the photos that he shared as water-related damage? Because when I looked into it, it looked like it could be any number of reasons for that, what's happening there.
Well, you see there's so they've got the metal edge that they tape the drywall to, and the tape, the compound is sort of falling off of that.
Yeah.
Because it's soaking wet.
Yeah.
I found this interesting piece about, it's from the American Gypsum Society or whatever. I don't know. I have the link, but they were talking about that could also be the result of like uplift. And he mentioned that it's got a cathedral ceiling. So what if there's trusses? I mean, could there be any sort of framing related issue that could cause that same thing to happen?
Well, it's unlikely that a cathedral ceiling like in this house is going to have dimensional lumber. I mean, trusses.
Engineered trusses.
It's unlikely. I mean, there's a thing called a scissor truss, which makes a vaulted ceiling.
Right.
This doesn't look like that to me.
Right.
So, I mean, right there, that tells me it's probably not that. But you're absolutely right. This, like, just to me has all the telltale signs of water damage, moisture.
Okay.
What do you think, Rob? It just looks like things that have gotten wet over and over again.
And really, even aside from the evidence on the drywall itself, seriously, anytime I see a picture or walk into a house with that tongue and groove ceiling, that's the first, even without any signs of damage, the first thing I think is, oh my gosh, what did this person get themselves into here?
Okay.
It's so funny. Like, so one of my earliest memories, it was just brought back to me. My uncle was a habitual DIYer, and he had a HVAC contracting business, but he honestly loved to put room additions on his 1950s ranch brick house. Like, it was one of these little tiny post-war homes, and he just liked to put these enormous California additions on this place. Wood siding, board and batten. He wanted a cedar ceiling in this beautiful great room he built. And in those days, they were telling us to put plastic sheeting and cathedral ceilings to stop vapor movement, right? But then you put this paneled ceiling over top of it and put thousands of holes in the plastic, which already has seams in it and what have you, and it's not really tight fit around this perimeter. So it just doesn't work. So the first winter, when it started to get really cold, and he was using this place, and interestingly, in the space, they had a little concrete bird bath with a pump on it, and it made it a little water fountain, and it was adorable. And he had a copper pan soldered up for the bottom of it so it didn't leak into the basement and what have you. It was beautiful. But when it got really cold, his ceiling started raining water and he could not figure out what the heck was going on. But I know exactly now what was going on is all that humidity from that bird bath was hitting that plastic, condensing on it and falling back through the boards of his paneled ceiling.
Yeah, and you know, people who are, I mean, building science is a relatively new area of study, right? And even now, we're learning every couple of years that the ideas that we have about how things work don't work the same in every house. They don't work the same in every climate. They don't work the same in every situation. And sometimes they don't even work the way we think they work at all. So it's like the fact that a homeowner, especially back then, just wouldn't really grasp the concept of how much vapor is moving through an assembly and how you think when you see liquid water that you think there's a leak somewhere, but it's,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
I once spoke with an architect who described a very similar situation whereby people had enclosed a porch but hadn't planned for moisture condensation, and their breath actually created a situation where it essentially was raining inside the enclosed screen.
They made a little cloud chamber in there. So
Totally gross.
Nolan, I think you got to pull at least one of those pieces of ceiling down to make sure that you do not have an air barrier. My guess is you don't, or they don't, and start there. And my guess is you're going to find some weird things when you pull down that ceiling. Fortunately, you know, those kind of spaces get hot, so they do dry seasonally. But in Nova Scotia, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, a lot of these situations, the first thing you really should do is look for the easiest thing to open up. Because, you know, when you're doing exploratory surgery on a house, you just have to look where the damage is happening, and you need to cut a hole in a wall. Cut a hole in a wall, pull a board down. Because before I saw the tongue and groove boards, I was thinking, well, you should cut a hole where the top plate meets the ceiling, and take a peek in there. Is there water running down the rafters? Is there water running down the sheathing? Is there water pooling in certain areas? You'll see water staining that'll give you clues as to where the water is actually coming from in most situations. You know,
That's what I thought was strange. I didn't see staining of any kind. It just looks like drooping tape.
well, I'm saying once you open up the cavity, you would see possible like tannins from the woods coming out in places that have been soaking wet and that sort of thing.
Mold stains. Even if the mold is not active, you'll see the black residue.
So the solution for something like this is to create an air barrier or to create a surface that's not going to be a condensing surface. So it's one or both of those things that you'd have to do to solve the problem.
And I got to tell everyone again, and we've said it in the past, you cannot have a paneled ceiling without some kind of air barrier under there. Drywall is a good thing to do because it's also fireproof, but there are some assemblies that you can use that are an alternate, but got to do that. Just because it looks finished doesn't mean it's airtight.
Yeah, and I've seen some modern houses where they actually do an insulated assembly on top of the rafters, and then they do the tongue and groove boards right on the bottom of the rafters with no air barrier behind it. But that's because their air barrier is at the roof plane; it's not at the ceiling.
Do you think that would work with the kind of odd geometry of this roof?
Oh, it would be a pain in the butt to try to make that work as a retrofit. No, I'm saying if that was the way the house was designed from the beginning, you know.
You know, this is one of those instances where maybe spray foam is a good solution, but it's going to cost you, and you know there always is a risk, of making a mess or having it go sideways. On the subject of spray foam, so I asked, I don't know if it was last episode or the one before that, we heard from a listener who said, flash and bat, using closed cell for flash and bat is not a reliable air seal. And I had not heard that before. So I asked for feedback from listeners. And coincidentally, I heard from Ben Bogey this morning. And he said that he has indeed seen closed cell foam pull away from framing members and sheathing in this application. So there you go. There's corroboration that it indeed is not a very reliable air seal sometimes. So I don't know what went wrong in his project in Connecticut, but I've asked for details. I'll keep y'all posted. Kiley, looking at this from the perspective of somebody who's trying to understand the intricacies of building science, what takeaway here do you think we should identify for other folks who are similarly in their building science curriculum evolution?
That's a good question. I hate when you put me on the spot.
I do it on purpose.
I know you do. Well, I mean, I think I already asked that question. It's sort of like, what indicated to you that it was moisture related? Because when I started looking into it, it was like, there's a whole slew of reasons why that might be happening. But you guys just nailed it immediately. You just knew. And looking for clues to that include that ceiling, right? So that's something that you're not going to necessarily intuit, but to take note of all
panel ceilings,
construction, right?
Yeah. I mean, one of the best signs when there is no visible staining or anything like that of water being a cause of something on drywall is when the actual material, whether it be the tape or compound or the surface of the drywall itself, is deforming or sagging because it's a water soluble product. And so when it gets wet, it tends to start to change its shape.
Sure. That makes sense.
It can be bulk water leaks. It can be vapor, that's condensing and creating bulk water. Should we get into the saga of Samantha Maver's drywall ceiling?
I think she needs to be on the show.
Yeah, we should wait to talk about that when she's on the show, but we'll just give people a hint.
Well, as a teaser, so our managing editor recently bought her first home with her husband, and welcome to home ownership.
Yeah, they thought they were just going to, get a quick coat of paint slapped on all the rooms so they could move in quickly. And someone started painting one of the ceilings, and every time they would roll the roller across it, and it would start to dry, big giant bubbles would start forming on the drywall.
Anyone who's ever pulled wallpaper off of drywall unsuccessfully, that's to say you've damaged the paper layer on the drywall and then tried to repaint without properly preparing the surface, has experienced this horrible thing. And no matter what you do, the paper that's been exposed doesn't have the waterproofing or the water repellency anymore. And so it just you can imagine if you soaked a paper bag, what happens to it, right? It's very similar paper. And you got to seal it up somehow. I think that's what's going on. We're talking about making a pilgrimage down there to all barrage her with our differing opinions and making her choose the right ones.
It's a game show.
What did she say? What did she say? Don't ask people who know about construction before you buy a house because you'll just be overwhelmed with stress.
We had to keep reminding her that this doesn't appear to be a big problem. So, as far as I could tell, they had never been in the attic of this place, right? It wasn't kind of what...
Yeah, no, yeah. And the attic looked pretty good. So it's probably a little bit more than a cosmetic problem.
I'm still betting on clogged condensate line from the air handler in the attic or a sweating register boot or something.
I was just reading about those. I should send.
What's your guess, Rob?
Oh, I don't have enough evidence to make a guess. You guys,
that's never kept you from speculating before.
I'll wait till you guys send me more pictures.
What do you think it is, Kiley?
I don't know, but Sam's lucky to have you guys on her side. She's gonna.
Well, I don't know if that's what I'd call it. Did you see the pictures of Sam's ceiling, Jeff?
No, I haven't.
I'm going to ask you to weigh in too when we have her on the show. So it's going to be great for us.
If only I could have gotten you so excited about my rotting soffit.
Oh my God, no way. Well, I know what's going on with your rotted soffit. They're rotting and they need rebuilt.
It's no mystery, right?
So what was the question you asked me on Slack yesterday? What was that quote you used? And maybe other readers have heard that. Go ahead.
Yeah. How did I phrase it?
Do you want to wait a little bit?
I had read it somewhere. No. I'll find it. Talk to that many people on Slack. Something about a squeezed assembly, and essentially
with attempting to have ventilation, right?
Attempting to have ventilation, and essentially my vent is a PVC pipe. It just pops up out of the roof. I mean, it just doesn't look like any other venting system I've ever seen.
Well, that's probably for your plumbing system, not to vent the roof assembly.
Oh, I thought it was to vent the roof assembly.
No, so drain waste vent systems need a vent through the roof to allow air into the system.
Oh, okay.
So, because you need to replace it as it's sucked down the drain, right? So it has to be able to get in there.
When you've ever
Most
had
homes have more than one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you ever have a sink that's in a weird location in your house and the plumber was able to get away with not venting it, sometimes you'll notice that it won't drain as well, or you'll hear gurgling noises when the water is going down, and that's because the plumbing is sucking the air from somewhere else in order to allow that water to escape, because it's like a vacuum. It creates a vacuum. If there's no air source going into the plumbing pipe, the water will not escape.
In which case, then I think I have a squeezed assembly with no venting.
I love the shorthand of that squeezed assembly. That's just like, I guess that just means not enough room for insulation. Is that correct?
That was my understanding of it. Yeah.
All right.
It was in reference to roof venting.
I think
Boy, if there are people nerdier about this stuff than us, I want to meet them who came up with that. That's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I think we're getting into the weeds here. We need next question.
Chris. This comes from Chris. This is not about roof venting. Just kidding. It is about roof venting. Years ago, the podcast went by the Fine Roof Venting and Air Sealing podcast, but lately I've noticed that roof venting has been getting the boot. What happened? Back when I was remodeling my upstairs, I was an avid listener, and for the first 100 episodes, the opinion by the host and GBA, that roofs should be vented for certain reasons. For me, I thought it would be especially beneficial because I was combating ice dams. So after some advice from the show and some GBA articles, I settled on putting a continuous 2-inch vent where my ceiling is also the roof plane using rigid foam sealed with spray foam. So he made this vent channel himself by putting a layer of foam spaced 2 inches from his roof sheathing, and he sealed the perimeter with some spray foam, okay?
Okay.
I extended the base down with 2x4s filled with fluffy insulation. Although it wasn't a lot of R value, it was better than what was there, which was 0. This was terrible. It was not difficult to do, but it took forever to custom cut and fit to each bay while constantly climbing in and out of my attic, playing in dirty old insulation. But I thought it would all be worth it if I didn't end up with ice dams anymore. All the while wishing I could just get it spray foam the whole thing and call it a day. Anyway, I got the whole half side of my house all repped up and have since gotten a metal roof put on, and I'm currently fixing up my soffits where they have rotted away and was going to open them up with continuous venting to go with my continuous ridge vent. I'm all vent ready.
I love this guy.
Then it happened. One day while enjoying your podcast, I heard Patrick, all casual like, mention how roof venting doesn't work. I think maybe he meant for someone else, not me. Then it happens again. Patrick says roof venting doesn't work. Now I start to worry. Then that last week on Pro Talk with Rob Delaney, you both say roof venting has been proven ineffective. So did I just waste all that time following advice given years ago by both FHB and GBA? Turns out most likely. Anyway, now my question. Do I just finish up my soffits non-vented now and call one half of my roof a loss of time, then just fill the bays with spray foam the other half of the house, where it's the ceiling roof, and just get on with the rest of your life, as Patrick likes to say? Sorry for the length of the email. Chris, that was hilarious.
So, do I get that he's crawling around in an unfinished attic that has insulation on the floor?
So he's got a kind of sloped ceiling part of his roof, and he's going behind the knee wall, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
I thought there were pictures in the assets folder. Did I put them in there?
I don't pay attention to when you put in the assets folder.
I go to all the trouble tracking these things down for you people, and you don't even look at them.
No, there weren't any from him in there.
Well, he sent them to me. I just didn't put them in there, apparently. So, Chris, here's the thing about vented roofs. I'm going to start off by saying vented roofs work great. It's a very forgiving assembly, but they have to be constructed to be vented. And many roofs just simply don't have the geometry or the details to be that venting works. You need to have a steep slope. I think 612 is minimum. You need to have, as you suggest, continuous and ridge vents. So when people say they're going to add venting or because the roof doesn't have it or because they're having problems, that's seldom a solution. But if you go into the construction process, planning a vented assembly, making it so it's going to work, it's a great assembly and it's super cheap, which is why it's everywhere. The reality is most roofs are not adequately designed for effective venting. It just doesn't work. They're cut up with skylights or valleys or chimneys, or there's not enough soffit vents, there's not enough roof pitch. The potential problems are limitless. So
What about
that's why I say it's been proven ineffective.
But now, yeah, and that's true. There's the venting initially came from a lot of research that was done in the early to mid 20th century, and a couple of these concepts stuck and then eventually got put into code as a universal truth. But like you said, venting is appropriate for certain problems in certain situations in certain roof assemblies. And it's not going to always solve all the problems that people have. It's not always even the reason why people are having problems in an existing home. A lot of times when people have ice dams, they don't realize it's because air is leaking into their roof assembly from the house itself. So air sealing is probably going to do about more good than venting. But that being said, he's talking about air sealing some rigid foam insulation and backfilling that with some fibrous insulation, which may actually be the right
effective.
thing to do the job. So
Yeah.
It's not like he didn't waste any time doing that.
No, I agree.
That's especially in a cape style house or any slope ceiling style house where there's narrow cavities for insulation that were never made to be fully inside or outside of the envelope of the house. That's usually where you see the biggest problems with ice dams and other moisture issues. It was when you have these closets that have knee walls that aren't air sealed, and
I like to describe them as spaces that aren't inside and aren't outside.
Yeah.
They're in between, and it always leads to the degradation in performance of insulation, and it can create a whole host of other problems.
yeah. So really, the work that's been done already is the most important work to solve these problems in his house. It's preventing there being a condensing surface at the outside of the interior of the house, and air sealing as well as he can to make sure that there's no moisture escaping to that assembly. So
it has nothing to do with venting, right? Forget about the venting. Concentrate on the air sealing and
I mean, the venting's if he did a good job air sealing that rigid insulation into those cavities and there are no missed spots, venting isn't going to hurt anything.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not going to be the big solving of the problem.
So what about Chris's question? Should he just quit doing this work on the other side of the roof and have it spray foamed? And I would say that would work fine, but the assembly is only going to be as good as your lowest R value, right? So if you've made it to R20, for example, or R25, and the part that you did yourself, it doesn't matter if you spray R30 or R50 on the other side. It's not going to perform any better, right? It just can't. Maybe a little bit, but not really. So I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I would say if you did this, so two things I would say. Like, A, it's an awesome experiment. Does the spray foam better solve your ice damming problems and make your that space more comfortable, or the other way? But I don't know.
Seems strange to have. It seems strange to have two treatments, though. Is there any argument to be made for keeping it consistent?
Well, so the thing is, as Patrick was saying, he's
cost for one,
Yeah,
Kiley.
for sure.
Yeah.
And time.
Yeah.
And he sounds like he's sick to death of this.
I don't know why.
Yeah, it's more a matter of like, is it worth his time, or does he have more time than money, or what? Is he sick and tired of doing the job? I mean, and when you say like having one wall that's a higher R value than another, I mean, yeah, your overall assembly is going to be at an average lower R value if you do that, but it's not going to be a waste of time to have. I mean, think about it this way: like when you're building a house and you're trying to figure out how much glass you can have to still meet the energy code requirements, you're balancing surfaces that are a lower R value to surfaces that are a higher R value. So it's not necessarily a wash or a waste of time.
Agreed. And I did walk that back a little bit by saying it's not going to make much difference. I mean, if he added depth to the rafters and then spray foamed, I think it would be a significantly better assembly. I don't know, Chris, I think you just got to finish this, buddy.
Yeah, you've done good work. That's definitely, moving towards the goal that you're trying to accomplish here. So you didn't waste your time. But the venting, if you're ready to do it, and you did a good job of air sealing, there's no harm in adding that as an extra step.
So here's one reason venting is kind of good. If you do have incidental air getting from the house up to your roof sheathing, it's been demonstrated that shingles do not allow drying from roof sheathing. I used to think they did. I think a lot of people did because, it seems like they should because they're not completely airtight, right? But they don't allow drying. So if you do have the vented cavities, you do have a chance for that wood to dry the other way, whether it's plywood, OSB, or board sheathing. And I think that's an attribute of vented assemblies. But they don't generally work.
As a side note, we could point him to a good piece by Scott Gibson, Vent for Every Roof.
Yeah, in fact, that's the first article that I stumbled upon when I saw this question, and it's everyone should actually. We'll put a link in the show notes because that article answers this question way better than we could in our little chat here, because he details the history of venting, the people who have done the research on it over the years, and where it is and where it isn't effective.
If you really want to get into the nitty gritty of this and have a little money to spend, Bill Rose's book, Water in Buildings, does a fantastic job of explaining the history of like codified venting strategies. And he explains why it often doesn't work in interesting detail, I will say. What'd you think, Kiley? Have you read any of that book?
I haven't read that book, but I just read a review of it. And how much does that thing cost? Everyone's always talking about how expensive it is, but it pays for itself.
So it's $100 list price, I believe, but I think I got it on Amazon for $70. It just happened to come on sale, and one of my friends on Building Knowledge, the Facebook page I follow, posted that it was for sale, and I'm sure they sold like hundreds of copies that day. They probably were like, why?
The review that I was reading, I can't remember who wrote it, but he was essentially saying, if you fix one leak as a result of this book, you will have paid for it. So.
Well, Andy Engel reviewed it not too long ago.
Oh, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Maybe
and we can put his review on it on the podcast page if you're not convinced by us.
Have you read that cover to cover?
Oh, are we being truthful today?
It's a heady book.
It's heady.
Yeah.
It gets, it is really detailed. And I have read sections with great amusement and entertainment, and other sections I just don't find to be as fun. So cover to cover, no, but if I was researching something, you can bet I would go and research whatever it is, that chapter.
Sure.
Have you looked at this book, Rob?
I've honestly never had a copy of it in front of me, although I've heard of it so much. It's sort of a crime that I haven't read it yet. So
it is expensive,
Yeah.
Maybe we'll add it to the GBA new book club. The BSM Beer is starting up a book club.
Well, that's a great idea.
Yeah, although I don't know that I want to read that cover to cover, so I take that back.
So you mean if you join the book club, you have to read it, right? It's not just suggestions. These are like...
Yes.
Oh, that sounds like so much fun.
Kylie keeps talking about how much she wants to get better at building science and how important it is to her job. And now she doesn't want to read the textbook.
Bible.
So, Rob, you got some news. I'm going to let you run with it. Do you mind telling folks about a survey, right?
Oh.
Yeah, so turns out that this survey's been around for some time, and
we have to tell them what kind of survey.
Yeah, so we want to do the best job we can to serve the audience of our podcast here, and in order to do that, we need some feedback. We need to know, where your interest area is coming from. Whether you're a pro or a homeowner, or what type of businesses you're in, and what's drawing you to the podcast in the first place. And that really will help us out in not only in picking the right kinds of questions for the podcast, but answering, reaching a broader audience as well. So we will have a link in the podcast notes. I think we're going to make the link, just finehomebuilding.com/podcast survey. And so if you go to the podcast notes, or if you go to that URL once you hear this episode, we would really appreciate it if you would just take the couple of minutes it takes to answer the questions on that survey, because really the best way we can do a good service to our readers is to know what they're really looking for.
How many
And
questions?
it's not going to be a big deal, right? It's a few questions, right?
Oh yeah, it's just a bunch of multiple choice questions. It'll probably take you just a couple of minutes to do it.
Well, please do that, everybody, because what Rob said is true. We want to make the show as good as we can and best serve the listeners. And you guys have been great. The audience has been increasing, so you've obviously been telling your friends. But once again, I'm going to ask that you do that again, please, because it really does help us out. Either on iTunes. I don't think you can review on Google Play, but if you could, if you listen on Google Play or some other podcasting service, if you could go to iTunes and leave a review, that seems to be the easiest way. Are there other places to review this or write a written review, Rob?
Well, you certainly can comment on the blog posts themselves. I will also add this to the show notes. All the different places you can, because we have people finding us in so many different places, and most of those places will have the ability for you to comment or review.
You certainly can on YouTube.
Oh yeah. I will also mention one other thing as a little incentive to answer this survey. We're going to randomly pick one of our survey respondents. And what are we going to give him, Patrick?
A podcast t-shirt of their choosing.
Yes.
I was going to say a Taunton t-shirt of their choosing, but I don't really mean that.
Is there more than one podcast t-shirt? I thought there was just one with a couple styles.
Well, you could maybe get a fine woodworking podcast if you had to, right? Or, I think there are other fine home building merch products there, but this is what you want. Kiley, you got some big news. Do you want to share with listeners what's going on with your career?
Oh, yeah. I thought you guys shared that on the last show, didn't you?
Well, I talked to Rob and Justin last week, but, why don't you explain what you're going to be doing?
Right. So under Brian's mentorship, I will be sliding over to be senior editor on GBA, which means that I'll be managing the content, that comes in, producing new content.
Moderating the forums, I presume.
Moderating the forums, which is actually the most edifying and intimidating aspect of the position.
Believe it. I totally believe it.
I'm going to be surrounded by, the people who are weighing in are experts, and clearly I'm not. So, but it forces me to. It's a very research heavy position, and I think it's good for me. I'm really looking forward to it, and I just love the content. It's a great honor. All the people. I just got off of a call with the brew crew, the BS and beer crew. So I'll be hosting that. It's a kind of a joint effort, but what a pleasure to talk with them. And, I really like Michael Maines a lot, who started that whole thing. And, it's a nice mix of content on the site and on that show that's conceptual and getting into the nitty gritty of the, installation details. And it's all over the place in terms of, there's just such a wealth of information. And I've been spending 2 to 3 hours on the site, just trying to determine how I'm going to approach it. And Brian has set me up for success, and I'm going to rely heavily on him. And you guys too.
Cool. Well, and I want to, don't be concerned, listeners. Kiley's still going to be on the podcast regularly, so that's not going to change. And she'll be able to better keep us informed about what's going on at that franchise. So that's cool.
That's the hope. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I want to always remind people, sometimes I don't think it's as obvious how closely intertwined GBA, Green Building Advisor, and Fine Home Building are. And they're basically our sister site.
Yeah.
We were the editors who started that website 10 years ago, or a little more than 10 years ago. And it's really just one of the most generous and genuine communities of people who both produce the content on there and engage in the forum there. And I'm sure they will welcome you with open arms.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a great resource, just as it's a different angle than Fine Homebuilding typically, because it's more focused on building science. But it's certainly my go-to place whenever I'm asking the hardest questions.
I want to point out too that the people who post regularly responses to the Q&A part of the website are genuinely nice. They are not trolls. They provide useful information. And if somebody does say something that's of questionable accuracy, the rest of the community will set them straight, but not in a mean way. They just like the information is good. You can trust it there.
Yeah. Yeah. And if they do get mean, I have the power to take those posts down.
Awesome. It's good to know it's in your hands, Kiley.
My hands now. Just.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank all of you for listening, and thanks to Jeff, Rob, and Kiley for joining me. Please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. And be sure to send in your questions on any of the platforms, and we will do our best to answer them. And remember, if your comment or question is read on the air, I will send you a FHB podcast sticker written with my very own handwriting, and it'll probably get to you.
Wow. Got a good stash still?
Yeah. So we got that many questions we can answer, right? Thanks for listening again, everybody. Happy building. Stay safe.